Lastly, we have Kyle McClinovich. Let's get that round of applause out of the way for this guy.
Yeah.
If you're in Massachusetts, you know him, you love him, you've been charmed by him. Kyle is the Vice President of Sales for Nova Farms, and I have been lucky enough to try his mushrooms. Hopefully you guys have been as well. Very, very talented. We are lucky to have him up here on stage with us today. So round of applause for these three panelists. Kyle's got some great things to say. He's actually been messaging me for the past week about what he's been writing. So I'm excited. Without further ado, I can't wait to hear what Kyle has to say.
Thanks, Fran. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, cool.
Beautiful.
So when Fran first asked me to speak on this panel, I thought, hell yeah, I love psychedelic mushrooms and I love talking, so it seemed like perfect. And then my second thought was, I am like not an expert on psychedelic legislation or science or anything of that nature. So I was wondering, like, what valuable insight could I possibly provide? But Fran, with her trademark enthusiasm, reassured me that my experience in legal cannabis and my passion for psychedelics and their healing potential was more than enough. So Fran, thank you very much for inviting me here and giving all of us the space to kind of have this chat. And candidly, completing a public speaking engagement in 2025 was one of my New Year's resolutions. So this is a nice like jump start to that. Maybe it'll lead to more speaking engagements in the coming year. So anyone who sees this, feel free to hit me up. Happy to chat.
We want to hear more from you. I hit this guy up. It's great.
So the idea of like fumbling through this portion of the panel was enough for me to like sit down and kind of organize my thoughts, which is why I have this in front of me. So forgive me, but I just want to make sure I kind of get all my thoughts out here. So instead of pretending to be like an expert or like a thought leader, I'll just share a bit about myself, my personal experience with psychedelics, and like some thoughts on kind of how I think we should be framing the conversation so that we can optimize the impact and minimize the risks when it comes to like legal psychedelics. So right now I'm the VP of Sales for Nova Farms, or as I like to say, a professional drug dealer. I got my guys from Nova over here right now. Thanks for coming out, boys, appreciate you. We're a vertically integrated cannabis operator in the Northeast. I've been an avid proponent for and consumer of cannabis for the better part of 15 years, so I'm no stranger to the medicinal benefits of cannabis use. You know, it started as like recreational use in college, and then it quickly like turned into like self-medication, and I really came to appreciate how cannabis helped me navigate my life. You guys may have seen the meme. It's a guy, he's like a puzzle, and then there's like a open piece in the back of his head, and he's holding it in his hand.
Yeah.
That is what cannabis was for me, was like the missing piece to the puzzle of like feeling good, my brain, my body. You know, but with that said, working in legal cannabis, I've been exposed to what I would kind of describe as like the abusive side of cannabis use. And it's made me reevaluate my own relationship to the plant. And I'm not here to cast aspersions on anyone's cannabis use. We got a smoking area out here. It's an amazing plant, and it's medicinal. And if daily consumption is optimal for you and your life, and it's stopping you from doing more destructive things or using more destructive substances, by all means. Myself was like not a daily cannabis consumer, and so for the last year I've consumed no cannabis, and my really only, I guess, consumption has been psychedelics. Up until a couple years ago, you know, my experience was mostly just from college, like eating a fistful of mushrooms and like blocking off the whole day and just, you know, having at it. And that was kind of intimidating, honestly. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my cannabis experience. It didn't really like speak to me on a, you know, like metaphysical level. It wasn't around until probably 2017 or 2018 that psychedelics started to come into my frame of like reference as like a treatment for mental health, anxiety, depression, all that. And I'll be totally clear, cannabis is amazing, but the potential benefits of low dose, properly integrated psychedelic usage is orders of magnitude greater than cannabis, and it's not even close, like not even close at all. So I began experimenting with microdoses and mini doses, and it became clear really quickly that this modality was so powerful that I was just like obsessed with learning more about it. If you had told me 10 years ago that my mental, physical, and spiritual health, and most importantly, like the sense of peace that I operate my life with would be where it is today, I would not have believed you, and a lot of that is due to psychedelics. Now, they're not the only reason for it. They're not a silver bullet by any means, but I really do feel that low dose, properly integrated experiences were a massive catalyst for like the healing and the personal growth that have led me to speaking on this panel, to finding purpose in my work with all of you, like all of you beautiful people, and being able to live my life from a place of love and peace and abundance. And I did not think that that was possible. So it's really important for me that when we talk about psychedelic regulation, that we approach it carefully and we consider all the possible avenues. So in my role at Nova Farms, I've seen how regulations in cannabis can impact the operators and the quality of the products that are provided to the consumers, whether it's excessive red tape or rules that are made by regulators who have like no experience and no incentive to consider all the possibilities. The people who benefit largely from that are the most well-capitalized organizations and the ones that have the most power, political power. And so it's forcing businesses to optimize in ways that don't always benefit the end consumer, the people who are taking the product for what they need it for. Anyone who knows anything about cannabis knows that potency and THC percentage have no relation to the actual quality of the product or its potential benefits. Yet we found ourselves in a situation where the consumer has been trained to seek out the most potent products with almost no understanding of minor cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, or anything that gives the plant its magic. So when it comes to psychedelic legalization, I'm very gun shy to support any sort of legalization measure because I worry that the likelihood of big business, particularly big pharma, the likelihood that they co-opt the industry with the amount of cash and the powerful lawyers that they have is a very real possibility. So if we rush to full-on legalization without a careful, considered framework, we could end up replicating a lot of the really bad aspects of the cannabis industry, specifically the risk of a small group of corporations dominating the space and leaving out the individuals who benefit most from access to the substances, but also that care the most about its application and its usage, right? So small operators in cannabis, they might love the plant, but they're very rarely the most profitable organizations for this matter. So in cannabis, we've seen how it's very important to create space for smaller operators to ensure that those who have been harmed by the prohibition have a seat at the table while the industry is being built. And we can't really overlook that with psychedelics, especially considering the history of psychedelics being used as a tool for healing within marginalized communities. So I'm a firm believer in the power of decriminalization. I think legalization is exciting, but it brings a whole new set of challenges, from regulation to taxation and ensuring safe and equitable access for everybody. It doesn't mean like an absence of oversight. Like I don't want just, people to run roughshod, producing and taking psychedelics however they feel, but it just means like creating a framework where people aren't criminalized or prosecuted for seeking access to something that has really profound therapeutic potential, and also, in reference to mushrooms particularly, literally grows out of shit in the ground. Like, you can't tell me that we can regulate that just like we can't regulate a plant. However, a pharmaceutical produced in a laboratory with synthetic components, that I think needs to be regulated. So really just looking to create an environment where people can explore psychedelics in a way that's not about profit necessarily, but more about the healing process, and where the access to providing services around psychedelics is more geared towards the people who are doing it for the right reasons, not necessarily for money. But that's not to say that it's not important, because it certainly is. So once we've established a solid foundation, we can kind of look to regulating psychedelics a little more deliberately, with attention to things like consumer protection, safe usage guidelines, and most importantly, mental health integration. My experience with psychedelics would be nothing without thinking about it after the fact and like figuring out how and why what I'm feeling impacts my personal life. And so you have to do the work, as they say. So considering this, how do we move forward, right? What are the highest ROI actions that we can take to kind of push the narrative forward, to increase access, to ensure proper education for psychedelics while avoiding the mistakes that we've made in cannabis? It starts with nuanced conversations like this, creating spaces where we can kind of get to the root of what's in the best interest of people who stand to gain the most from a world where psychedelics are a viable alternative to the current mental health treatment modalities that I think everybody would agree are clearly not doing, not working, not cutting the cheese. So I think it's important for us to set reasonable expectations for what psychedelics are and what they are not. They present an opportunity to create what I would consider like a seismic shift in how hundreds of millions or potentially billions of people interface with what is an increasingly complicated and stressful world, but without focusing on the other components of health, what we feed our minds, how we nourish and care for our like physical bodies, and how we build and foster our personal relationships, and how we align our actions with purpose. Not much of that matters. So I hope you guys found this helpful or insightful or something. So I appreciate you guys for listening, and it's an honor to be up here. And Fran, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle.